Oh, hey, hello. All right. So, who's here? Okay, so to get started this week, I just wanted to kind of check in, see if how you guys are doing with the format of the class and how everything's online and interaction with Canvas, and if you have any questions with that, could go over them now. You guys all good? Can everybody just give me some kind of like signal that you're there and paying attention? Cool, thanks, Kira. All right, good. Okay, so yeah, I kind of wanted to use this kind of as like a discussion thing, but it seems like you guys aren't really into the class discussion thing, so I'm gonna leave that to the discussion boards online so you can use those. And I thought, just as a little warm up, I talk about some of my art. This latest piece I finished. See if what you guys think about that, or just to show some kind of like contemporary thing. Where did that go? Dang it. Okay. Technical difficulties. Sorry. I found it. All right, one more time. Okay. Can you see that? You can see this painting here, right? I wish it would show the chat and the other thing. Oh well, I'll just talk about this for a sec. So this is a painting I recently finished. It's like 2 feet by 3 feet, oil on canvas. Um, I started it before my son was born, so like in 2019, and I did this artist residency up in Vermont for like a month right before my son was born, and I started a whole bunch of paintings, and then I kind of went away from them for a while, and I finally got back to painting a lot since COVID, and my son's a little older, so this painting is kind of like the challenge of um, like a color problem of like so there's these four guys playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then what if there was like a transparent figure and all the color behind him was affected by that green? So there's a lot of like, it's all color mixing and no glazing, because you could just paint this whole thing naturalistically and then do like a green glaze over the whole thing, and then but it's not like that. Each color is mixed for its specific spot, kind of like putting a puzzle together. And it's kind of like some fun references to stuff I think is interesting, like Dungeons and Dragons and the Satanic Panic of the 80s. Like this guy in the back in the middle is wearing a Striper t-shirt, and the name of that album was called To Hell with the Devil. So it's kind of some fun stuff. And that guy in the middle of the back is kind of like the guy from one of the guys from Star Trek Next Gen and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So that's just a little fun warm up before we get into the other stuff. So we're going to be moving into early Renaissance here. It seems like screen share wouldn't be confusing, but it's so confusing. Maybe that's just me. I feel like I wish I had a little extra monitor that showed like what was being shared. Like, why doesn't it have my chat thing? This old man here. Okay, so we talked about the early Renaissance. You gotta think about humanism. So there was that video in the last module where that guy kind of talked about what humanism is, and I like to think about Leonardo da Vinci and the idea of being like a Renaissance man. You know, he was interested in more things than just painting. He was interested in earth science and cartography and applying all these ideas and his worldly experience and all these sciences he was involved with and studying and applying them to art. And so the two would inform each other. So he'd, study drawing grass and how grass moved in the wind, and that would like affect his studies of like aerodynamics and stuff like that. So, it's this really integrated way of thinking that was really new. So the humanists it's moving away from that idea of the Middle Ages where everything was about the Bible and how devoted you were to God, and everything was like would pay off in like your devotion and how devoted you were. Whereas like in the Renaissance, you were more rewarded with fame and honor and like how um, how amazing and talented you were, you know, in individual scholarship rather than just like not worrying about yourself as an individual in medieval times and just putting your nose to the grindstone for God kind of thing. And, you know, also we have that thing with humanism where they're moving away from this strict religious interpretation of art, and they have this Greek and Roman mythological lessons weaved in with these religious narratives. So we're going to see a lot more of those examples like this. So here we have the sculpture competition for the doors of the Baptistery of San Giovanni. And so they ran this sculpture competition and all the best dudes came, and then they get whittled it down to the two finalists, Brunelleschi and Ghiberti. So I'll show that guy next, but I just want to talk about this for a sec. So the subject is the sacrifice of Isaac. It's a story from the Bible where God told Isaac to sacrifice his son, and at the last minute, and he's going to do it, but at the last minute, the angel sweeps in and saves the day. So it's just kind of like a foreshadowing of Jesus being sacrificed. You know, it's like a story from the Old Testament. So this is Brunelleschi's version. It's very emotional and violent. You can see the angels like grabbing Isaac's hand and pulling him away. You know, I don't want to spoil it. I'll just move on to the next one. So then here's Ghiberti's version. Oh, I'm not in full screen mode, am I? Dang it. Here we go. So we got Ghiberti's version where it has this more classical influence where you can see the figure of the boy. He's more like face to face with his father and greeting him as a man, and they're both like accepting their fate. You know, you could see how much Ghiberti cared about anatomy, and you know the angel's a little bit further away. There's kind of like the suspended moment there, and the crazy super foreshortening of the angel, just like, you know, his head's popping out and then his body just quickly like shoots back with those wings into space. So I have a little side by side here. So just to do a little comparison, you can see on the left Brunelleschi's, his figure with the boy is just so tiny and skinny and sad, and his father is like this huge lurking figure, and the angel's grabbing his hand, and it's like there's all this like pent up action there. Whereas Ghiberti's is a little more graceful, has that more of that classical influence that was so popular at the time, which is why Ghiberti won. You know, the pedestal that he's standing on has this Roman scroll, so they just love to like layer on those little references. And then Brunelleschi's was more complicated and more expensive to produce, so they went with Ghiberti's. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's up to you which one you think's better, but both pretty good. But don't worry about Brunelleschi because he doesn't go away. He also um, invents the first mathematical version of perspective, which there's a video about that. So check that out in the module. Okay, moving forward to Donatello. So if you remember those sculptures from last week, they were still like mounted on the sarcophagi. They weren't separated yet. So Donatello's still using that Greek and Roman influence. And he's got that, you can see in this figure here, he has that contrapposto pose, that figure's knees bent. Here's a close-up of the contrapposto action. So you see those hips slanting down to the left and the shoulders sloping down to the right, and one knee's higher than the other. This is important because, you know, he's introducing motion to sculpture. There's like this fluid, naturalistic way the body moves, and he's trying to grasp that. He's also seeing the body as like as a whole and not like just sculpting different parts. If you remember that Hercules sculpture on that sarcophagus, it wasn't a sarcophagus, sorry, it was that podium. But the Hercules, his head was kind of big, the proportions are kind of weird. It had contrapposto, but it wasn't like very graceful. But when you see Donatello's Saint Mark here, he just looks like a cool guy, I think. And you get the sense of those clothes really like hanging off the form. You also, like, even though this sculpture is in that niche, it still works by itself, you know? It's still like a three-dimensional figure and not just like with the front portion is sticking out, like that Hercules figure mounted on the side of that podium. So this sculpture is supposed to inspire that civil pride, which is, you know, really a part of like Roman society, you know. In moving away from the medieval times and trying to, like, you know, think about the community you're in as a whole and what you can do for the greater good. So yeah, these are some of those sculptures I was kind of talking about, the medieval from the Chartres Cathedral in France, you know, where they're kind of like pillars or parts of the pillar rather than Donatello's fully realized figure here. So you can also see this Donatello's St. George has that, it's the continuation of this armed figure. This guy on the left on the Chartres Cathedral is a soldier, along with these clergy fellows. So St. George was the guy that fought the dragon, and it tells the story. It shows the story below it in this frieze here. You can see that this piece was made for the Armorers and Swords Guild, which is pretty interesting because, like, in this, no, in his St. George here, you would have, I guess there's holes drilled in the head and a place on the hand. So during festivals and stuff, they would actually put like a bronze helmet and sword there and take it away. Obviously lost to time and space. So one of the amazing things about the frieze below St. George here telling the story is that he included atmospheric perspective in sculpture. So you can already see this linear perspective of these receding arches going into the distance, but then I'm just realizing this photo isn't fantastic, but so it's in the book, but you can see in the book you can see there's these trees here, and they overlap on these like little hills into the background, but also the amount the trees project diminishes, so it gives this feeling of atmosphere, which is pretty crazy to achieve in sculpture. Oh yeah, here's a better version of that. Sorry, I added a bunch of new slides to this today, and I wasn't aware of how they lined up. Anyways, so yeah, we got the atmospheric perspective, and then Donatello would also use linear perspective here on the right with all these orthogonal lines leading to one vanishing point there, somewhere in the middle. So this is Donatello's version of David. You know, you got that contrapposto pose again, super graceful. This is like the first freestanding nude sculpture in like 1,000 years. Like I said, the medieval people weren't really into this idea of nudity, so this was kind of brand new stuff. It's also freestanding, so you can walk around it 360 degrees, you know, and see the whole thing. It's interesting that he's standing on the head of the Goliath. I remember talking about this sculpture in my art history class when I took it, and there's a lot of talk about him having like long hair and wearing a hat with flowers on it, and it's kind of like a sexual thing going on. So some of the other versions of David we'll see here, like, you know, Michelangelo's David and Bernini's, and they all choose kind of like different moments to portray in the battle. You can see here Donatello is chosen like after the battle, clearly cut off the head of the monster, and he's standing there satisfied. But Verrocchio, you know, he also did the same kind of move with the dead head there on the ground, but clothed figure. And the important thing about Verrocchio was he was Leonardo's teacher there in Florence. He had a very important workshop. He seems to have this kind of like fun, jaunty attitude towards him. You know, he's got that contrapposto as well. So Masaccio, this is a tribute money painting. Tribute money painting, yeah, it's fresco. So there's still some Gothic themes happening in this painting. He's doing a lot of like really progressive stuff though. He was good buddies with Brunelleschi, like I said, the inventor of modern perspective. They did have perspective back in like ancient times, but it was a little different and not as mathematically derived. And in that video, it shows how specifically Brunelleschi figured out how to do it. Because like, if you just draw like a horizon line and a vanishing point and then orthogonals coming off of it, you can still make things look very warped and weird if you don't determine it correctly. I took a whole class on perspective and it was really complicated. So especially determining shadows, like mathematically, of like where the light is to how tall the figure is, and then, you know, if there's two light sources and all that stuff. So you can get real crazy about it. And Masaccio is starting to do that. So you can see this linear perspective on the right in the building. And then also he's using atmospheric perspective for that background to recede. You can see the foreground figures are super bright and colorful. Then that first mountain back here is kind of green, and then as it moves further back into the distance, there's more and more white added, getting that feeling of the effects of the atmosphere, like water and space. And then also, he's using this idea of a continuous narrative where multiple parts of the same story are happening in the same image. So front and center, you have Jesus talking to the tax collector, and the tax collector is like, hey, give me my money. Jesus motions to St. Peter, who's this guy he's pointing to on our left, the man with the blue sleeve and the orange robe, and he points him, go get money out of the fish in the water. So that is the other part of the story on the left, way left. That's St. Peter pulling the gold coins out of the fish's mouth. And on the right, he's donned his robe again, and he's paying off the tax collector, same guy with the short tunic over here on the right. So yeah, that's fun. And also he's doing, this is like a good example of like a united or unified light source, where you can tell that the light is coming from the right hand side of the painting. You can see it feels like there's actually bones and anatomy underneath their tunics and stuff. See this tax collector guy? You can kind of see the bulge of these muscles right here in the center of his, like the edge of his scapula, and then the center of his spine right here. So that's cool. It gives the painting more naturalism. Yep. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about that guy. And I mean, he still has those halos that are pretty stylized, but they're all like in their own perspective for each individual person, like how they're standing is situated. So it's kind of like a new take on an old theme. So this is Masaccio's Holy Trinity. You have God up there, Jesus, and then the Holy Spirit is that little white thing between both of them, and that's a dove. And then below them, you have the Virgin Mary and St. John. It's interesting, Masaccio chose to paint Mary as older than her true age, than Christ would have been at her death, at his death. And so here God is like holding up Jesus and presenting him to the viewer. Then you have a few other little details, like down below, there, right here, there's some blood trickling down. That's like the Eucharist. And these guys below them are the donors, Lorenzi and his wife, Lorenzo Lenzi and his wife. And then even further below that, you have the skeleton. The skeleton is saying, I was once what you are, and what I am, you will become. So it's just kind of like memento mori. Remember that you're going to die, so like live well when you're alive. And this is like the textbook example in like art class of perspective. So you can see all those of linear perspective. So you can see all those orthogonal lines are coming down here on to like right here to like Christ's feet. And then, so the way it works is you're looking up at Jesus and you're looking up at this archway, and then he's laid out the skeleton there in such a way that you're looking down at the skeleton. So your viewpoint is somewhere around here. I just think that's like kind of like a neat new thing they started to do where, they're really starting to think about the viewer and how they're interacting with the piece. And then it's also like with the view of the skeleton, it's like it makes you kind of like sad and reminds you that you're going to die, but there's Jesus there reminding you that you will be resurrected. So there's this kind of like circular narrative thing going on. Now we have Fra Angelico. So this painting was painted for the Dominican monastery of San Marco in Florence. This is another Annunciation scene. So it's that point where St. Gabriel comes and tells Mary that she's going to have the Christ child. So there's some interesting stuff going on in this painting. The perspective is pretty good. It seems a little weird, but if you see where this is painted, it's like 4 or 5 feet off the ground at the top of a staircase. So when you're like walking up the stairs, it looks pretty much perfect. So it's an interesting way to paint this thing for the monks of this monastery. He also painted this painting to look a lot like the monastery. It's very like, it has those archways and this like stucco walls and stuff, and also that little tiny door back there. All the doors are a little small. So there's some odd things going on, like how big the figures are for the space. Like you can see that Mary, if she stood up, she'd probably hit her head on the ceiling there. Like I said about that doorway being like way too small for her, he like made her huge. And also he like chose to not use atmospheric perspective. You look up into the distance on the top back up here, top left, like this tree is far away, but it still has the same amount of care taken to paint it as like Mary's face. Yeah, so it's just like perfectly, beautifully organized. I think this is a great painting. And then also interestingly, he painted a lot of, he used like some kind of like formica or gold fleck in the painting of these wings. So they're just like amazingly detailed and they sparkle when you walk by them, I guess. So got those big halos. Keep an eye out for that. Those are going to go away after a while. Piero della Francesca. This guy, I didn't really care about this guy when I was younger, but getting into him like more recently over the past couple of years, like he's pretty awesome with how articulate he is with all the figures, like how specific everything is, and how well he organizes the space, and how like kind of meticulous he is about organizing the space. So some interesting stuff about this painting. This is the moment where Jesus comes out of the tomb, the resurrection. So usually in most stories of the Bible, when the resurrection happens, he comes out of a cave, but here Piero della Francesca's painted him coming out of a tomb. So that's a notable difference. And then you have all these Roman soldiers hanging around, and they were sent there to guard the tomb because the Romans were scared that the people were just like Jesus' followers were just gonna pull Jesus out of the tomb and be like, "Hey, look, he resurrected and stuff," because it was like prophesied and stuff. So they didn't want that to happen. So they sent these guards there. They fell asleep, and Jesus popped out of the tomb on his own. So that's the moment that we're seeing right here. Yeah, and you can see Jesus's body looks kind of like Greek sculpture. It's very defined, specific. He's looking right at the viewer. So the thing about that is, if you look at the background on the left here, you have this like kind of barren, sad landscape working its way back here up this hill, and the trees are dead and stuff. Whereas over on the right hand side, you have this kind of like nice path to the city with the green trees, and it's like kind of like downhill in comparison. And that's like a metaphor to show you that the path to heaven is hard and the path to earthly rewards are easy. And Christ is looking at you, the viewer, being like, what are you going to do? It's time to decide, kind of thing. And he's still got that halo perspective. In perspective, though, it is inclined and not like a full circular one. So jumping ahead to Andrea Mantegna. And this guy is really showcasing his talent. He's really excited about solving these problems of drawing and paint. These problems of perspective with drawing and paint. So he did this, this is on a ceiling, it's called a camera picta. And you can see all these like foreshortened figures, but they still look naturalistic when you're looking up at them. It's crazy that they're all in a circle. I think this picture is upside down from the one that's in the book. So he's kind of like standing on the shoulders of the giants of like everybody that came before him, but he's also like killing himself to like move painting forward too. And this is also that thing I like where the painting is made to interact with the viewer. So this is painted in like a newlywed's bedroom, and you have all these like putti, which are these little angelic figures, and there's no like real specific interpretation of like why they're in painting. Everybody kind of has their own. Not everybody has their own thing, but they mean so many different things, like good luck and good fortune and just like prosperity and stuff like that. So it's just good to have them around, basically, when you see them. Then you have like some unidentified spectators here. Everybody's kind of like peeking into the bedroom. And then you have fun stuff like this potted plant just precariously sitting on this wooden stick here. It might, fall out at any moment and the pot would come crashing down on you. And you have this peacock standing on the edge there, about to fly into the room. And then you have foreshortened Christ, also known as dead Christ. And this is just the most amazing example of foreshortening. So when somebody says foreshortening, this is what we're talking about. So if we're in a drawing class, one way to talk about foreshortening is thinking about these series of anatomical features as hills of a mountain, and how they interact with each other and overlap here, and how do they meet each other. So each of these kind of is placed in front of the other one. You can see the big hump right here of kind of where the drapery ends, and then his chest, and then finally his head, his lips and nose. So it takes a lot of practice and a lot of knowledge of anatomy to be able to do something like that. And he's showing it all off. Also, with the narrative, he's putting that stigmata right in the viewer's face. So you try to get away from it, and it's still in the middle of the painting. And you look at these figures on the left. It's Christ's mother and Mary, and then no, his mother is Mary. Mary and Mary Magdalene and Madonna. So then you look back at Christ because they're looking at him. So there's this kind of no escape to remember that Christ died for your sins. Then the book talks about how the feet are really small, which I guess so. But your foot and your hand are the same size as your face. So if in a cartoon or something, see how big my hand is and how big my face is, and then how this hand is really small. But if I was over here, they get closer, all get closer in size. So when you're drawing from life, those things are all you're not this is a trick of photography, of anatomical drawing. So those guys were drawing stuff as they saw them. They know that a hand or a foot is as big as your face. So I don't know. That's how I think he was drawing this painting. Yeah. All right. That's all for those guys. Any questions? Thoughts, ideas? Hey, did my screen stop for anybody else? Your screen stop? Am I still here? Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, maybe just reboot it, and then you can come back and um, the video will be on in the module, so you can just watch this part later. So we did early Renaissance. Now we're going to do high Renaissance. Oh yeah. Yeah, it was really common for artists to recreate other artists' work. That's all that's like mostly how they learned. It's still a big tradition of going, if you ever go to a museum and you see somebody um, painting or drawing in a museum, it's from that old tradition. So there's like a lot of master copies. It will say after, if you ever see that when you're looking at art, if it's like Michelangelo after Leonardo, just an example, that means that Michelangelo is doing a copy of Leonardo's painting. So I have a couple of examples of some more of that stuff, building on what we've already looked at, and where these artists are getting their ideas from. I feel like that doesn't get talked about a lot in the book, but yeah, you have to remember that all these guys knew about each other, and they were all like seeing each other's artwork and trying to like one up each other, especially like in the high Renaissance, and then from there on after that. Do you guys have any other questions? Yeah, it's pretty much the same idea, but I even put a list of the artists you can choose from. But I missed a couple of them, but I put in pretty much put the greatest hits on there. And yeah, and it should have unlocked at 2 o'clock. Is there any other questions before we jump into high Renaissance? All right. High Renaissance. So the book mentions it a little bit. Giorgio Vasari's Life of the Artist. I think they bite a lot of stuff from that guy with the whole like Quattrocenco and like that. All those things are from Vasari. So he's like the first ever art historian, or the first ever guy to write a book. So he wrote the Lives of Artists. And obviously to him, the high Renaissance was like the best of the best, this period that we're moving into, like Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, Titian, all the rest of the Ninja Turtles. And they're like really perfecting representation, perspective, proportion, human anatomy, and that Greco-Roman influence. So first off, we got Leonardo da Vinci, and this portrait is by his one and only student there, Francisco Melzi. And they were like really good friends, and he lived with them and stuff. And there's another painting floating around that gets attributed to Leonardo as a self-portrait a lot, but it's not. It's like somebody painted that after him. So like we were talked about a little bit before, Leonardo was like the Renaissanceiest Renaissance man there was. He cared about everything. He studied everything. Here's a couple examples. He was into botany, geology, geography, map making, zoology, military engineering, animal lore, anatomy, physical science, including hydraulics and mechanics. And like I said, these studies informed his art and vice versa. And he wrote treatises on them. And a treatise is like kind of like an old-timey word for a how-to book, like everything he believed. So he has a treatise on painting, but it's not finished. He like didn't finish a lot of stuff. It was super, he did a whole bunch of stuff and worked really hard all the time, but there's a lot of projects that were unfinished that you'll see, such as the Sforza horse, which is it's known as. So I had that picture of one of his studies for the horse sculpture that he was supposed to do. And there's a little video in there. It's short. All the videos I try to post are short. So he went to live with Ludovico Sforza in Milan, commissioned him to make this giant horse, and then a war happened, and they had to take all the bronze for that. But I was going to say, he has a treatise on painting, but it's just kind of like somebody went through all his writings and kind of compiled it into one thing, but it kind of makes sense. It kind of doesn't make sense. Not that, it's just like obvious that he didn't sit down and edit it into one thing. It's just kind of like a bunch of random ideas all put together as a treatise. So here's one of his paintings, one of his finished paintings. There's actually two of these, and you could tell the difference. One of them, the wings on, this is an angel over here on the right, and the wings on the angel and that red cloak are a little different, but they're pretty similar. So here you have Madonna in the middle, Christ is on the left, and then John the Baptist is that little dude putting his fingers up, and then the angel there on the right. Some important things to notice about this are Leonardo's amazing chiaroscuro and sfumato, like how he rendered those figures and how soft the transitions from light to dark are. It's just, I don't know. I can't get enough of it. I have some more details later. And then check out Leonardo's this triangle composition was a big deal for Leonardo and like other guys in the Renaissance, but they pretty much got it from him. So yeah, and then you have this kind of like swirling narrative with the hand gestures here. You see, you have Jesus making that hand prayer sign. You have John the Baptist pointing up, and then you have the angel pointing back at Jesus, and then you have this hand, Mary's hand here, kind of like looming over the whole thing. So you get kind of this swirling effect, or circuitous. And so this is at the time when oil paint is really taken its foothold, and these guys are just mastering it. You could see that's what I was talking about, that sfumato stuff. And then you have this real crazy background here where Leonardo was really into, he has these like very specific botanical studies of these flowers and stuff in the front. But then you have this like made up landscape back here that is like kind of scary. So you have the bleakness of the landscape in the back, and this like wholesome little narrative up front to have this interesting dichotomy there. And he's also a genius. So he does like little cool stuff where he uses this shape to kind of mimic this shape of the figures here. He knows what he's doing. He's Leonardo. So one of the things about Leo is, I call him Leo. He didn't like sculpture. He thought it was like beneath him, and it was like manual labor. I was like, he could do sculpture, but he wasn't really like excited about it. Unlike Michelangelo, who we'll talk about in a second, who felt the opposite. So this is The Last Supper, another one of the most famous paintings by him. It's actually a failed fresco that he did in the refectory of the Church of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan. So a refectory is like a dining hall, so the monks would like sit there and eat every meal and like look up at this and, you know, like remember why they're there. This is whenever you see one of these Last Supper paintings, it's like the moment in the story of Jesus where he is announcing, one of you is about to betray me. And that's what he's doing with his hand gestures. And then you see all these little kind of little plays come about in each of these 3-figure groupings here. And they're all kind of like, what? No, who? Me? And the only person that isn't really reacting is Judas right here. But you can see some of these other familiar hand gestures that are being thrown around. I had a teacher once say that you'll always be judged on your hands and feet, you know, by other artists. We're going to see how well how much attention you pay to those. So Leonardo's pretty good at painting hands and feet. He used all of his powers of perspective to make this painting. You notice all the lines lead back to Jesus here. And then he's haloed by this window back here. So he didn't choose the traditional circle halo. He's got more of this like naturalistic halo. Then it's also said that this is kind of like deep stuff that's not really that important for this class, but I think it's interesting. These tapestries that are on the wall here aren't in mathematical proportion or mathematical perspective. They're in musical proportion. So the way they recede in the background is like not really, what's it called? Accurate. So, which is, I think, is a pretty interesting insight to this, because there's also this idea of the hands and the loaves of bread on the table might represent musical notes. If you look at each hand and loaf of bread, it reads like across the whole painting, and you can go on YouTube and check it out, and it's like this little song that, you know, it's like Renaissance, what kind of, like a hurdy-gurdy or like a harpsichord or something. It's very old-timey sounding, but it's a pretty interesting idea. So yeah, like I said, the sad thing about this painting is that he experimented with tempera on it, and now and it didn't work right. And now what we see, like 90% of it is like reconstructed by like art historians, and only 10% of it's like original anymore because it's degraded so much over time. There's like this really specific way you're supposed to put wet plaster on the wall and then put the pigment on it for it to dry properly, for it to last a long time. And, you know, tempera is egg and oil paint. And it's like, those aren't the mediums for that. It's supposed to be water based, so it binds correctly. So after a few hundred years, that stuff started chipping off. The thing was that he wanted it to be shiny. And most fresco is matte finish, so that's what he was trying to do. I imagine it looked really good at the time, and then just kind of didn't work out. So this is, you know, the Mona Lisa. It's like a hyphenation of Ma and Donna. It's like means Milady Lisa. So there's some interesting points about this painting that we should talk about. So one of them that is that she's looking directly at the viewer, which is abnormal for the Renaissance. Most of them you'll see are in that three-quarter view or in perfect like side view and profile. And then I love looking at the background of this painting because it's so bizarre. It's kind of like that Madonna on the Rocks painting. If you looked at that one, the background on that, it's just like this really strange, otherworldly place where Leonardo was just kind of like letting his imagination run wild and painting all these like strange geographic forms. So this is just kind of like both pieces of the background with the figure taken out, so you can kind of see just the landscape. And it's not like from life or anything. He's just like making it up. So a little bridge back there and a little road that goes nowhere. I feel like it's like a really good like insight to how wonderfully strange Leonardo was. And this is my this painting is like so famous, you know, but you forget about it's so famous for a reason, you know, like look how amazing that sfumato is on the face. Like this transition from here, from her cheek into shadow, into reflected light. This piece right here is like reflected off like her skin down there, into shadow, back out to skin again. It's like it's only possible because of oil paint and how many layers he put on top of each other to show something like that. I have an oil painting where I'm messing with this kind of technique, and it's obviously nowhere near this. Yeah, so another thing about this painting was that it was commissioned by the guy, and Leonardo never finished it. He fell in love with this painting and was like, yeah, I'm going to keep it. Yeah, just look at those hands. It's like you could touch that. You know what that fabric would feel like if you touched it. It's like, it's amazing. So this is kind of one of those techniques that you learn to draw fabric where it's X's and Y's. So this would be an X. Here's a Y. Maybe it's just all X's actually. Well, here's a Y. So if you paint fabric or draw fabric bunched up on an arm. If you think about X's and Y's going down the arm, it kind of simplifies it to make it make more sense. Here's another X. Oh, here's a Y right here. Oh yeah. So it's like the raised up parts that we're talking about. Here's another Y. Yeah, art school stuff. And then we have Leonardo's Vitruvian Man. So this is part of like one of his obsessions was with this classical architect named Vitruvius. And Vitruvius had these ideas that you could figure out this perfect figurative proportion to also use in architecture. So that's what Leonardo was investigating here with the Vitruvian Man. Like the circle to the square, and then all these little, you see these little lines he drew on here to denote methods of measurement. So, I mean, I don't know specifically, but just in it as an example, like maybe from your hip to your knee is as tall as half a window should be, or something like that, or like, you know, from the door to the edge of the building should be like one full human, or something like that. And then I don't know if you guys know or not, but Leonardo had this really weird thing where he just wrote backwards all the time. So you can see it here. This isn't reversed. He just wrote backwards. Nobody actually knows why he did that. If he was trying to like write in code or something so nobody else could read it, but imagine if you spoke like Renaissance Italian, you know, you can kind of like look at words written backwards and see what it says. It's not that cryptic. So next Ninja Turtle is Raphael, and so yeah, let's just get into this painting. This is the Marriage of the Virgin. There's like these old stories that like aren't necessarily in the Bible, but they were like popular and like retold a lot. So this is the story where Mary was supposed to meet Joseph, and they like, it was like popular in Renaissance for these guys were really excited about all these the heritage of Jesus and like where his family came from and stuff like that. So that's what this painting is all about. So that's Mary in the middle, and then she has all these suitors on the right. And the idea was that the high priest will give Mary to the man who presents him with a murad that miraculously blooms. So you can see Joseph has this little thing here. His rod has bloomed, and then he's putting the ring on her finger. And then all these people behind her are the other virgins, and these are all the losers here. All those guys back there. Oh, not that guy. Yeah, these are the losers, and this guy's a loser. And he's so angry, he's breaking this rod over his knee. And, you know, it's kind of like a justification for Raphael to show how good he is at foreshortening. You can see this knee going back in the distance is pretty masterful, and this leg going back there. And, you know, he's like leaning on one leg. Pretty exciting stuff. So a little I don't know if you guys care about this art school stuff, but I'm going to put it in anyways because that's part of my thing. So an interesting thing about like sculpting and drawing is if you're going to draw something weird like this, you have to think about where the ear is in relation to the relationship to your foot. The ear being kind of like the center of your head, and if he painted this guy like a little more over to the left, he would look like he was going to fall over. But since like I didn't do a good job drawing that. So if you follow this ear down, we come like right next to this heel. It's so hard to draw. I wish you could just snap a straight line. So if like the heel lines up with the ear, you're good. So all these people, you don't think about it when you see somebody standing straight up because it just naturally works out. See this ear to this heel. I mean, I keep calling it heel, but it's your ankle. It has to be lined up with either the inside or the outside of your ankle. I don't know. It's kind of a complicated thing. It works better and it makes more sense in sculpture when you see like a sculpture like leaning wicked far over. It's like it looks like it's going to fall over. It's just kind of like a general rule of sculpture practice and not like a law or anything. So Madonna in the Meadow. So you can see some of the stuff that Raphael learned from Leonardo here. Like, I feel like it looks so much like Madonna on the Rocks. It's crazy. Like, it has those two. John the Baptist, you can tell because he has this little crucifix thing. And then Jesus obviously has that like tiny little, very delicate little halo. And I feel like this is the first time that halo makes sense, that perspective halo that we were talking about. Like, if you think back to Masaccio's, that painting where all those guys in the foreground, like there was like Jesus and the tax collector guy and all those guys had halos. It's hard to imagine like how their halos work, but I feel like it really makes sense with Jesus' halo. Oh, John the Baptist has one too. And Mary's, like how their halos connect to their heads, I think makes a lot more sense in this painting. And then, so you can see this triangle happening here. Very popular. And then you got those really large figures in the foreground and that atmospheric perspective happening back there. Receding in the distance. So you have the influence from Raphael's master is Perugino, but he still has that also that Leonardo influence that he would have seen with the, like I said, the large figure, small background. But Raphael has, it's not a problem. Raphael has like an affinity for describing stuff, like everything has to be everything has to be figured out. There's no like room for your imagination or like dark, mysterious spaces. And then, so it's kind of like this happy little scene where there's two kids playing together and a mom, and the kids look like they're having a good time, but the mom kind of has this like weird, sad look on her face. And there's the presence of the crucifix, so it's telling the viewer she knows that Jesus is gonna die, so she can't be like super happy. Just kind of a bummer. Yeah, so I put in this other all these guys. You got that pyramid. You got Jesus, and then you got that atmospheric perspective and the landscape in the background. And yeah, you can see like Leonardo loves this, like has a little mystery, a little mushy stuff back here. Even in the foreground, it's like real dark. But this really nails that idea on the head with Raphael's School of Athens. Like everything is defined. It's in full light. Every figure is like, you know, from history. They all like have names and stuff. They're not just like random people. So the Pope commissioned this from Raphael to paint inside the papal apartments in the Apostolic Palace of the Vatican. The Vatican is like jam-packed full of like artist treasures. And there's actually 4 paintings in there, but this is the only one anyone ever talks about. So there's the 4 branches of human knowledge. You have theology, law, poetry, and this one is philosophy. So this, like I was saying, this is like the who's who of philosophers that the Renaissance humanists were excited about, who they thought about, and who like kind of like guided their ideas. Back in the background, you have these 2 statues looking over the whole thing. This guy and this guy. That's Apollo and Athena. And in the center, you have Plato and Aristotle. And you can see Plato's like pointing up to the sky and Aristotle's motioning towards the ground. And they're both holding their books that they wrote. So Plato's pointing up to signify that heaven is the source of his philosophical ideas, and Aristotle gestures towards the earth, where his observations came from. So we're saying that Plato's more concerned with like higher thought and more like artistic stuff, whereas Aristotle's more concerned with scientific things like math and more practical stuff. And interestingly, you could see, I should have put up better pictures, but this guy right botched it. This guy right here is Raphael. He's like looking at the viewer. And so he put himself on the like more scientifical side, which is an interesting choice for him. And also you got this little dude from Use Your Illusions, Guns N' Roses album. Yeah. It's calm, it's balanced. Super confident and like has all the aspirations for the contemporary Renaissance man of the time. Moving forward to the party dude. Just kidding. Dad jokes. Okay, Michelangelo. He was a painter, sculptor, engineer, poet, and architect. He believed that sculpture was better than painting because you could literally make a man. I can't see my air quotes, but I'm putting them in. So the sculpture, he believed like the sculpture was already like contained within the block of marble, and he was just like revealing the finished product, which is pretty interesting. Also, Michelangelo didn't subscribe to this idea of those mathematical proportions like Leonardo did. He used proportional distortion in his narrative or in how he displayed his work, as we'll see in his David. So also we're looking at his Pietà, which is pity. It's Madonna holding the dead Christ. But it's an interesting piece because obviously he's dead, Pietà, after the deposition, after he's come off the cross. Mary holds him for a minute before they take him to the tomb. And this is interesting because Mary's like as young as Christ or maybe younger. It's an interesting choice. And it's like Michelangelo's way of saying that, like, because she was like the Virgin Mary and she's so like pious and virginal that she's like forever youthful. And then he made Jesus like smaller in proportion to her because he should be like, he's like a full grown man and she's kind of like towering over him if you look at it, you know. So it has that reference for when Christ was like a baby, when you see all those Madonna and child paintings. So that's an interesting little comparison to make. And he does have the stigmata, but it is very barely visible. And that's that kind of like hopeful. Maybe he's just sleeping. You can see, I don't think you can see it in this picture, like his cut on his ribs. But you can see his stigmata on his hands right there. And what else did I want to say? And that has that triangular composition again, super stable, and just like Michelangelo is just like at the top of his game. He did this like in his early 20s. This is a piece of marble, and he has like got flesh, and bone and fabric out of like a piece of rock, and then polished it to the point where it looks, I don't know, it's so close to natural. Like, look at this, like how his like pectoral muscle goes from like it's like underneath your deltoid, but then it comes all the way across and joint attaches to your chest right there. But you can see how it pushes. Her hand holding him is like pushing up on this muscle right here. It's just like, I don't know, it's so crazy. He's so good. How do I want to erase this? Thank you. Yeah. It's beautiful. And then Michelangelo's David. This is another point of the narrative that we were talking about before, where I don't think I said, but you know, I guess I just assume you guys know, but I should say that David is that historical figure from the Old Testament where there is this giant being a jerk, and they sent out one person to go fight him, and he kept beating him up, except when this little kid came, David, and he killed the giant with a stone with one shot, and thus settling the whole war for everyone, so nobody else had to fight and die and stuff. So anyways, this is the moment right before he kills the giant. In his right hand here, he has the rock, and this thing on his shoulder is the sling. So he's like thinking about the task before him and how hard it is. This is like the textbook example of contrapposto hips. This thing's, I'm so used to like snapping on the iPad in Procreate, but we'll just do these bone points. It's where your muscle attaches to your pelvis. Pelvis actually comes up to like here. So then, and then his rib. This is like your 9th rib right here. And that actually comes down. Rib cage is like almost inserts into your pelvis right there. But anyways, you can see the rib cage is kind of like at this angle. Shoulders definitely at this angle. And the hips are cocked to the other side. This leg is straight. This leg is bent. This amazing contrapposto. So the thing about this sculpture was it was made to go on top of a building, so you'd like be looking up at it. So we like purposely distorted stuff. Like his head is huge in comparison to his body, and then his hands are huge too. So if you were looking up at this thing and it's like 20 feet off the ground, it looks like perfect. And this is like, you can totally see the old Roman style in the sculpture. It's like perfect. This is perfect sculpture. I love that sculpture. So then Pope Julius II offered Michelangelo a job to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in 1508. This is the private chapel for the Pope where the cardinals gather when they have to pick a new Pope, you know, and they put out the white smoke when they made a decision type thing. This is like a crazy, complicated, and difficult project. First of all, it was huge. 128 feet by 45 feet, if you can imagine that. It's 70 feet off the ground. The ceiling is curved, so you have to like adjust for those curves to like draw things correctly, so when you look up at it, it doesn't look distorted and stuff. And Michelangelo didn't know how to do fresco at the time, so he had to teach himself how to do it. And he did it. He killed it, and it took him 4 years. So it shows the whole story of the creation, the fall, and the redemption of mankind. There's 300 figures on there, and the themes are all chosen by the Pope. Just have a couple details to show. Here's the fall of man. So on left, you have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Evil. And this is a snake. You can see it has like the torso of a human, but it goes into the snake. Excuse me. And then those same two figures on this side being cast out of heaven. So importantly, you can like just notice Michelangelo's amazing sense of anatomy and how he can like play with these forms to like get this amazing sense of dynamism in the figures. Also notably, he didn't use female models. He only used male models, and then he would like make them like a little more feminine and then like put breasts on afterwards. So you can kind of see it's like a bodybuilder with female attributes. His especially here in one of the Sibyls. So the book talks about the cleaning process, and nobody really talked about Michelangelo as a colorist before they cleaned the Sistine Chapel. He was just, sculptor and amazing draftsman, but also you can see like his brilliance with color and how bright and beautiful these things were too. Just so crazy. And how much detail he put into these things that you could barely see. Like, we're seeing this like on a computer screen, but they're 70 feet off the ground. It's like, 70 feet, it's wicked far. I've been there too when I was in high school, and it's just like, it's such a strange experience because they kind of like, you walk in and you're like looking up at the ceiling and you're not supposed to talk and you're not supposed to take pictures, and you're kind of like slowly being herded through. So you're not supposed to like just stand there and hang out for half an hour. You kind of have to like look around as you walk because they're trying to get more people to come through. It's really weird. I have like vague memories of it. This is like 1999 or something. So this is what the building looks like. You can see the Sistine. This is the Sistine Chapel. The ceiling, how it arches like that, and then some other famous paintings on the sides over here, and then the next one we're going to talk about is back here. Michelangelo's Last Judgment. So they called him 20 years later and they asked him to paint the altar wall. So that's where the Pope would lead mass for the inner circle, like his important dudes in there. So this is the moment when Christ is judging. He comes back to life, or comes back, and he's judging everybody, whether they can go to hell or go to heaven or go to hell. I don't know why I'm stumbling over this. Christ is judging everyone and smiting them and stuff. This is Mary on his left here. There's some close-ups. Yeah, this is Mary here. And she's like, well, she looks down at the people on the left who are the blessed, and the people on the right are the damned. So she's helplessly watching all this stuff take place, and Jesus is just going to work. So you can see some of this more anatomical distortion here. Like, look how big Jesus' torso is compared with the rest of his body. In this like tiny head. And like, I mean, his legs are foreshortened, but it still looks strange. Also, look at this guy over here. Super torso. Super muscle. It's like very Michelangelo-y. Interestingly, Leonardo made a dig on Michelangelo one time, saying, when he was talking about figure drawing, and you can see how much more subtle the anatomy is in Leonardo's drawing as compared to Michelangelo's, and he called Michelangelo's a bag of walnuts. You can think about it, like everything, every form is articulated, like every little muscle is articulated. So Leo tried to stay away from that. So on the left, you have the angels pulling everybody up, and they're all coming back from their graves and stuff. And on the right, everybody is like being pushed down, and angels are punching people in the faces and throwing them and pushing them into hell over there. Oh wait, sorry for jumping around like that, but I wanted to make a couple comments on this. So this guy right here, this is Saint Bartholomew, and he was skinned alive in his martyrdom. I wrote that over there. So this is he's holding his flayed skin, and this is believed to be self-portrait of Michelangelo. Which is interesting. So he's like placed himself on the right-hand side of this, the doomed side, because he doesn't know if he's going to go to heaven or hell. This is a close-up of the bottom left of the people being saved and being brought up to heaven. So there's angels like pulling people out of the graves and people shooting up to heaven there. I think it's interesting that there's this skeleton and this skeleton. Who are those guys? I guess skeletons get to go to heaven too. So on the right-hand side, this is the scene of damnation, and this scary demon has brought this boatload of people on over here. The earth is cracked open and all these people are being pushed into hell. And I wanted to show this example of the artists looking at each other, you know. So you have this doomed man. He comes from the right-hand side, and there's a serpent swirling around and biting him on the leg, and two demons are grabbing him and pulling him down. You can see this guy has horns, and this guy has a forked foot. And he has this look on his face of like, I'm going to hell. And like we said, when we were looking at Roger van der Weeden's deposition, you can see the emotion on their face of when Jesus died. And I think this is Michelangelo's, not a reference, but his like realization that he can imbibe his work with more emotion than it had before. Moving on to Titian. So this is a pastoral symphony. Pastoral means like this idealized version of country life. So you have this, you know, it's all cool out there in the country and everybody just hangs out and plays guitar and hangs out with naked women while they feed you water and play flutes and stuff. So Titian has like this amazing sense of chiaroscuro, of like these features and figures emerging from the darkness. So it's this clearly sunny, beautiful day out, and these men are in shadow. So there's some speculation on whether perhaps the female figures are just part of their dreams, or some kind of like they're kind of some kind of like magical figures, because they're both of the men are clothed and the women are naked. So I don't know, there's kind of an interesting dreamlike quality going on. And the man on the left has his city clothes on, whereas the man on the right is more like what a person in the country would be wearing at the time. Yeah, so he tries to do this holistic approach of garnering like a otherworldly or dreamlike affair with the things he's painting, but also how he's painting it. So he uses this more like light, brush stroke and some more darker, mysterious places. So maybe it's a memory or it's make-believe. It's an interesting way to do it. So the book says like was believed to be Giorgione painting for a while, but then they finally realized it's Titian, and I think it seems pretty obvious. If like this one on the left is Giorgione, like look how the one on the left, it looks, all the features seem like cut out and pasted on. It almost looks like a collage compared to the painting that Titian did, where it's so much more homogeneous and like it has this like common thread of feeling throughout the whole thing with color and with the brush, the mark making. Whereas this painting on the left, I feel like this figure with the child, it looks like he painted the whole thing and then painted that figure afterwards. I don't know, it feels really disjointed to me. Probably why nobody really talks about Giorgione, but we know who Titian is. Just my opinion. So then, the Venus of Urbino is super important painting. So this was painted for Ubaldo II, who became the Duke of Urbino, hence Venus of Urbino. This is just an Italian woman in her bedroom getting ready to get dressed. But this painting became the standard for the reclining female nude, so we'll see a lot of versions of this come after. And this is kind of like the humanist idea of where before we didn't see any nude figures, like in medieval times, but the Renaissance guys figured out how to kind of bypass the stigma by painting these classical figures. So it's not cool for you to paint a naked lady in her house, but it's okay if you're not painting a naked lady, you're painting Venus, like a Greek goddess. So yeah, he got to play with some of these new themes by using that guise, I guess we'll call it. So you can see her hand is covering her genitalia, but it's also kind of like her fingers are kind of curving in and she's like looking directly at the viewer, which is like super provocative at the time. And it's like the only way you could get away with it is by, you know, saying it's, oh, this is like a reference to like classical antiquity, all that fun stuff we like. Yeah, she's also like a symbol of fertility and desire. The little dog down here is like a updated version of like a Cupid or like a stand-in for Cupid. And these servants back here are getting her clothes. This painting is just like an amazing example of Titian's mastery of color, form, composition, and light. So you can see, I talked about Leonardo's talent with sfumato, but if you look at Titian's, like this movement of the form over here, they said, I heard someone say that he painted like 14 or 15 layers of paint, of like transparent paint to get that smooth gradation there, transition. And look at this, even this leg in the shadow here, like it's like in shadow, but it's still like luminous. It's like, how do you do that? So then also, if you look at how he's composed this painting, this diagonal here splits the painting in two, from this side to this side. He's also split the painting in two this way, and then he splits it like this. This is into two, splits it in two again, and then he splits this and this, and you get smaller and smaller to get back to this little tiny landscape back here. So it's just like, I feel like he's just like showing off his like mastery of the craft. He knows how to do everything. Like this, how he's painted this pillow down here. It's like, it's amazing. Okay, stop nerding out about this. So this is my, wanted to show Manet, like kind of like 100 years later. Manet paints this figure of a prostitute in Paris, and this painting was like super shocking at the time. She's like clearly a prostitute. Her name's Olympia, a common prostitute name at the time, like when you would like take like a fake name. She's looking right at the viewer, and then she's like covering up her privates as to be kind of like standoffish to the viewer. And then you see the dog, and then she's got a cat, and then you have this African servant that he put in, which is another like super progressive thing at the time, because you didn't see like African people in like European paintings at the time. So, but that's in the future, stuff that's like coming up. Just wanted to show that impact of Titian's Venus of Urbino. Oh man, what were you talking about with the no eyebrows painting? Maybe the skeletons are there to stuff. Oh, that's maybe the skeletons are there to solidify the fact those people are dead. Yeah, I think that's a good call. It's like the body isn't important anymore, type thing. Oh, were you talking about Mona Lisa with the eyebrow thing? I think there's certain like little details like that, yeah, where something that was fashionable at the time. I watch a lot of these videos about like Tudor England and before that, like Edwardian England and stuff. And it's crazy how important style was to them and how much makeup and all those little details were. So I think it's probably that. Like you'll see a lot in these old paintings. I didn't talk about it, but their hairline will be like, it'll seem like they have a really big forehead, but it's because like they would pluck their hair out and then be bald from like here back, because it was just cool, stylish, having a high forehead. That's kind of like in the northern early Renaissance stuff that I can think of right now. So anyways, so now I'm done with my stuff. If you guys have any other questions or whatever, and then you can work on your PowerPoints and then get those in. I extended the due date, so it's tomorrow by midnight to give you guys a little more time. And then it seemed like you guys didn't do I think I got a couple people turned in the discussion there. I don't think I got everybody. So even though you missed the due date, you should still contribute to that discussion because it's pretty interesting. The idea is that nobody knows what that painting means that Bosch did, and it's really crazy. So if you like zoom in and start like moving around, it's like it's bizarro. And I did it last semester and had everybody kind of like say what they thought their opinion was, and everybody's was different. Like what you think the meaning behind the painting is. There's a little video, the guy talks about it a little bit. And he's like, I don't know. Not really, but all right, so are you guys good to go do your assignment now? And I'll hang out if you want to ask any questions. Well, I can show my painting that I'm working on in my spare time. This is just kind of like for fun to paint this, trying to paint that Renaissance way of like a million layers. So this is only like, I did like a black and white painting, and then I'm like slowly putting layers of color over the top of it. So it's probably only like 3 layers, but you can see like how it's still so pasty and white. And this is like the what's her name, Margaret and the Dragon, where she was eaten by the dragon and then bust her way out with her crucifix. Yeah, so if you compare my painting to like Titian's, you can see like how crazy it is in his like smoothness. Oh yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, you can definitely find the notes online. Also, um, my friend showed me in that Bosch painting, if you guys have looked at it yet, in the hell, well, I shouldn't say hell, but in the black and scary part on the third, on the right side of the triptych, there's some music notes down there. And I think it's like on a guy's butt, and somebody has put that music on YouTube. Yeah, you could definitely find that music though. I'll post the it's called they call it butt music on the YouTube thing because it's like the notes are written on the guy's butt, so I'll find it.